and welcome to a new episode of the Books to Last podcast. For this episode, I'm joined by Ashley V. Robinson, comic book writer, actress, and professor over at the Geek History Lesson podcast. I'm really excited to share this episode with you all. Ashley is one of my absolute favourite people, and I had so much fun having this discussion with her. I hope you all enjoy it too.
Hi, how are you?
I'm so good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining me. It's really, really exciting for me just because I knew that I definitely wanted you on the podcast when I first came up with the idea, and I was like, oh, wait a bit, but the fact that you were interested is just amazing. So thank you.
Listeners, Jordan says, for having me on, I bullied my way on. I responded to her post like we didn't know each other and asked to be on. So I am so excited to be here. Thank you.
Well, honestly, incredibly excited. I'm going to be cool. I'm cool.
You are cool. And we're already friends, so there's no issue.
Yeah, I'm actually really relaxed about this. This is not like a big deal at all. No. No. Okay, so welcome to Books to Last podcast. Just for the benefit of anyone listening who hasn't listened before, the premise of the podcast is that we challenge people who love to read, book lovers, anyone who's ever read a book, or preferably more than 5, to pick the 5 books that they absolutely couldn't live without and take away to their deserted island / mystery locale. Just to sort of kick off the conversation, what are you reading at the moment? Are you liking it? What's your current read?
So I'm reading 2 books right now, which is typically how I operate. Last year, my very good friend and a wonderful poet, Sudarshana Mohanty, started I guess we'll call it a social justice book club, where me and a bunch of other ladies, and it is only ladies, even though men are invited, we're reading like a bunch of books about social justice and change in an effort to try and be better humans. And so right now we're reading The New Jim Crow, which is about the Jim Crow laws and segregation laws in America. It is fascinating, but it is a hard read. And it is a very academic book. So there's a lot of words on the page and the chapters are very long. So I read a lot of YA still, and I read a lot of comic books. So it's just you got to shift your mind into a different way of thinking. I am enjoying it, but it doesn't bring me joy the way fiction brings me joy. If you know what I mean? But I think engaging with material like that is very important, especially, I know nobody can see me right now, but I am a Caucasian person. So that's something that I'm trying to onboard. And then I'm also finishing up Frank Herbert's Dune, which I tried to read when I was a teenager, stopped, and then I read half of it last year and then stopped. I read like 300 pages when I was on a set shooting a TV show one day, because a lot of being on set is sitting around and waiting. And then I just picked it up again. So for anyone who knows Dune, I got to the part where Paul meets the Fremen and drinks the water, which is actually where I think the movie's going to cut. So that worked out really nicely. So now I'm reading basically what I think is going to be the second movie when they come out in October. And that combines my dual love of science fiction and fantasy in an epic story. So I'm really, really enjoying Dune, even though, and you got to remember, right, it's written in like the 50s, 60s. It's definitely a white savior story. And there's, but the women in it are very good and very powerful. And there's low-key witches in it, which I didn't know. And then I learned there were space witches. And I said, I better read this now, because if there's a witch in it, I'm going to read it.
Also, I was going to say that is the one that they're making into a movie at some point soon.
Yes, with Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya, I believe, playing the leads.
Yeah, I saw the announcement when Zendaya was announced. There was a lot of excitement. She's not someone I really was aware of before. Sort of, I think I want to say Spider-Man was probably the first one where it was, I really was aware, and then I really liked her in Greatest Showman, so I'll probably end up watching the movie just because I think she's excellent.
I like her a lot. I think she's really talented. She was like I think she had a Disney show or was a Disney star, and I might read a lot of YA, but Disney Channel shows are not my jam anymore. So for me, it was the same thing as she was in Spider-Man. And I was like, oh, she's really good in Spider-Man. Okay. And she's great in Euphoria. So I'm very excited about her casting.
Yeah, I didn't really watch Disney Channel when I was a kid because we didn't have that channel, so we can't get it. I didn't
have it in Canada either. So.
Yeah, so like we didn't pay for the extra package with all of the American kids shows. We had the 3 British kids shows, and it's often a point of making fun for my husband and his sister because they both had it and they have all these references for Disney shows, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But it's I know she was quite good back then. It's really great that she's managed to sort of demonstrate all of her talents and that sort of thing, so that's really good. And I tend to try and flip between my fiction and non-fiction and that sort of thing because I have a lot of building related books that I need to read for for sort of professional development and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's difficult to flip between the two though, because reading about construction and that sort of thing is incredibly dry.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly dry. Awesome. So part of the idea for the podcast was that we wouldn't just sort of do a desert island, because mainly whenever I think of sort of desert island discs, I always think I really don't want to go to a desert island because I hate sand. Like
if I'm never going to convince you to come to LA, it's just the beach.
If I get stranded anywhere, I really don't want it to be a desert island. I can deal with sand in moderation, but if the entire island is sand.
That's so funny.
It just reminds me of when I used to go and see my grandmother, who lives sort of on the coast in the north of England, and we used to go to the beach a lot with my cousins and that sort of thing. And then when I'd come home, socks weeks and weeks later that have been washed multiple times would still have sand in them, and and I just couldn't deal with it. So so part of it was that you get to pick your isolated location to be cast away to. So if you have any ideas about where would you like to go?
I actually know exactly where I would like to go. I know like the town I would like to go to, and it's actually closer to your neck of the woods than mine. I would like to be isolated, I suppose, a couple kilometers outside of, because you can't be actually in the village itself. Aberfoyle in Scotland. It's my favorite place I've ever been. I love Scotland. I'm originally from Canada, so the weather's pretty much the same, but a little bit less snow. I think it's so beautiful. Someday when I'm a very grumpy old person, which I can't wait to be, I'm going to steal things from restaurants, try to stop me. I'm going to be 80. I want to retire in Scotland, or I want to have like a cottage on the coast somewhere, maybe Skye, but Skye seems a bit intense in terms of the weather. But I visited Aberfoyle when I was 14. My high school went there, and it's literally my favorite place I've ever been. So somewhere kind of like that, somewhere a few kilometers outside, where I'm inside like a domed bubble because I'm being punished by a higher power, probably. Who knows?
Why not? Yeah, Scotland is an amazing place. We went wild camping in Scotland last summer when we were allowed to leave.
I know, I was jealous.
So for the brief window, we thought wild camping was maybe a smart move in terms of, because neither of us had a holiday between sort of March and August. Like, we hadn't had a single day off, let alone gone anywhere. So we thought a smart choice of break when we're not supposed to be seeing people was wild camping, because we could literally see absolutely no one but us and the dog. So we went up and did that, and it's amazing. Some of the, just, you can't actually believe it exists as you're driving around.
Yes,
it's amazing.
It's like the shot in Skyfall where they go into that one valley in Scotland where everything shoots, and the camera doesn't do justice to like the scale or the beauty of it. So yes, I would like to be rugged and uncomfortable, please.
Sounds great. Okay. So, if we move into your list, just as a list of 5 books that you want to take with you to your rugged and uncomfortable location in Scotland, just so the listeners know, I did send there's like 3 very small rules and stipulations, caveats as you would call them, to the what books can go on it. They are pretty simple, just generally that it can't be a complete series, aka it cannot be an entire trilogy or an entire book series, because, you know, one book should really just mean one book. I did feel the need to put this in there based on some other people that I spoke to about it. And then the remote location, wherever you're going to go, is going to cater to your every need. You're not going to want to escape because you'll love it so much. So you don't need sort of first aid guides and raft manuals just in case you want to spring and escape. That's unnecessary unless you really like reading them. And also all genres of books were completely open. So your nonfiction, your poetry, drama, graphic novels, anything that you want, it's all reading. Audiobooks even, they're reading. That's a controversial statement.
Which is insane. They're books, it's reading.
Yeah, I tend to avoid that debate on the internet. Yeah, hopefully they don't find this podcast. Anyway,
you can tweet at me at Ashley V. Robinson, because you know what? I will just ignore you. So it's fine.
That's the best approach to have to it. So, those being the rules, what is the first book that you would take with you to your location?
So I think it's really interesting that you gave the rule that like it could be any genre, because I wrote my list and then I went back to look at the rules just to make sure that I followed. And I have a play and I have poems on here, and I was like, oh, good, I'm glad, because I thought I was going to have to justify it. My first choice, I picked a lot of things that are very long, because I'm figuring I'm going to want to read things of length, and if I'm going to be there for a long time, an indeterminate amount of time, then hopefully something you won't get sick of right away. So I picked the Iliad by Homer, which is my favorite piece of like ancient Greek or Roman mythological writing. I know everyone's going to come with Ovid and his Metamorphoses, and those are great too, but I like the Iliad better. I love the moments when the gods come down from the sky and like imbue Achilles and Hector with their powers. I first read the Iliad when I was a teenager after I saw the movie Troy, which is terrible. Unless you're just looking for the cheesecake, then it's great. There's a lot of very, very attractive human beings in that movie, and we were robbed of Sean Bean playing Odysseus in the Odyssey. That's a great casting choice, but the Iliad is great. It's very, very long, and when I first read it, because I was quite young, everyone was like, "Oh, you can't read that. It's going to be hard for you," and that can be true about classical texts. That can be true about older writing, but if it's a good translation, one that's been done and is either considered the best or is sort of closer to your time, like a more modern translation, it's very accessible, because this is where all tropes and themes came from. And I love the story of Achilles, and I love the story of Hector in particular. The romance for me is like not really here nor there. And another reason that I love it is I'm very into comics and graphic novels and superheroes, and a lot of the tropes come from the Iliad and the Odyssey. And so the Iliad is my favorite version. I can't read the original version, so I'll pick a contemporary translation and take that with me. It will probably take me a couple days to get through if I'm not doing anything else.
Awesome. It's actually on my list to read this year, because I
yes,
I fell in love with Greek. I'll try again. I fell in love with Greek mythology when I was really young, and I read the Percy Jackson series by Rick Riordan.
A great series.
Yeah, it was my introduction to all of that, and I read like literally everything he wrote afterwards about all different other mythologies. And I kind of realized that even though I was familiar with a lot of the stories, I wanted to go back and sort of read where they came from. So I've got a lot of that sort of thing. So I want to read, the Iliad, the Odyssey, all of Stephen Fry's retellings that he's been publishing, that all sound amazing. But that's...
If you like the Iliad, Virgil's The Aeneid, which is later, it's a Latin book, is a great follow-up, because it takes place right after the fall of Troy. And And then in my house, one of the raging debates is what is better, the Iliad or the Odyssey, and I'm team Iliad, so I had to put it on the list.
It's a really good choice. It's funny, the length of books seems to be a running theme. Our last guest, Lauren, said the same thing. She said if she's going to be there for a while, she wants some really long books. So she was looking at length as a contributing factor as well. So
interesting.
Sounds really good. Okie doke. So that's your first. What is your second choice?
My second choice is also a classic. This is a set of poems. In English, it's called The Lay of Marie de France. Marie de France was a court poet in France, and she wrote, a lay is a type of poetry. She wrote what are considered to be some of the best translations and the best French telling of the King Arthur mythos. She's really famous for telling a lot of the Guinevere and Lancelot story and introducing a lot of that into like what we think of for that sort of vernacular and what we do with Arthurian myth in contemporary story time. Like every cartoon has a version of the King Arthur story, and it always involves the love affair between Guinevere and Lancelot, even that's some of the least interesting things. Dying for that Green Knight movie to come out someday, but I speak French. I studied Arthurian myth in uni. So the Lay of Marie de France are my favorite versions of the story. I know, again, we're supposed to love some of the English histories, but the French one is my favorite. It's all mythology. It's all fake anyway. There was a dude named Arthur on a hill somewhere, right? And Arthurian legend are some of my favorite myths and mythology. And something that I've been doing as an adult person is I'm trying to connect more with my personal heritage, because I feel like that's something that white people who moved to colonies or who were colonizers didn't do very well, is like preserve our history and tradition. And my family is English, French, and Scottish primarily. And so this is kind of a cool Venn diagram of my familial history as well. And then maybe if I can be like really petty and try to bend the rules, I can bring an English and French translation, and that will give me something fun to compare. And then I mentioned earlier that I love fantasy. So both of these choices tie deeply into that. And because the Lay were written by a woman, they're also considered to be the first feminist Arthurian retelling. Obviously, it doesn't stack up because they were written in, I don't have the dates, I'm sorry, like the 14 or 1500s. They don't stack up next to the Mists of Avalon or like a more even like BBC's Merlin is like way more feminist and forward thinking, which is a great series if anyone needs something to watch. I loved that
show when I was a kid.
I loved it so much, so much. And then when she became Lena Luthor. But so there's a lot of really great stories for the female characters. Morgan Le Fay is really, really kick butt in this. And again, they're quite lengthy. So the Lay of Marie de France are going to be my number 4. I had more classics in this than I initially thought going in.
Well, I always think they're classics for a reason, and they often get like overlooked for sort of contemporary stuff. In most of the when I speak to most people who are reading, they sometimes get forgotten about, but I love classics. I remember when I started studying English literature properly at the slightly more grown-up level in high school. It's just a really, really fascinating subject where you sort of, you can expand on 2, 3, 4, 5 pages of meaning just from a single line of text and all that sort of thing, and just going with historical context. I really want to read some more about the Arthurian sort of legends and that sort of thing, because it is really interesting, and I did love Merlin when I was little, and I really want to explore that a bit more. That sounds really, really interesting as well, and it's so cool that it encapsulates so much of your own sort of history and background and stuff. I do agree. I probably should look more into my own sort of heritage. I tended
but you have the advantage of sort of living in probably closer proximity to the general area.
True. It's always something that it's really interesting, and I find it really interesting. So many people I speak to in North America have got such sort of interesting ties and backgrounds to all these different cultures, and it's just really fascinating to just listen about. And French, Scottish is just a great one to mixed together. They're really interesting.
It's also just traditionally they were allies. So like it's kind of funny that like in terms of ethnicity, I'm like, oh, like my maternal grandfather was French. My maternal grandmother was Scottish. So like even though they were long held allies against the English, I didn't get those two heritages until after they'd come over to the quote unquote new world. Also a quick Google search got my dates totally wrong. Marie de France wrote her lay in the 1100s in the 12th century. So I'm not a historian, sorry, but I was like, as soon as I said it, I was like, I know it's wrong. I've got to Google it really quick. I'm sorry. I haven't been in university for a minute. I wrote one of my final term papers on her lay, so I was like, I know a lot about these. This will be fun.
Yeah, so we've got a text from sort of before they started counting. So it's for us.
Yeah. That's so funny.
And the 12th century.
Yeah.
Are we slowly moving forward in time?
We kind of are, except 2 and 1 are flipped because so my number 3 is from the end of the 16th century, beginning of the 17th century. I'm also bad at math. My number 3 is, in my opinion, the greatest thing ever written in the English language. You can fight me on this on Twitter if you would like. And that is Hamlet by William Shakespeare. I just think Hamlet is like the coolest thing ever. When I decided I wanted to be an actor, I was living in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, which is named after, obviously, Stratford upon Avon. It has like the largest professional Shakespeare festival outside of, anywhere in the UK where he was actually from. And I started performing with a youth theater company, and the first Shakespeare I ever did was Hamlet. I played Rosencrantz, and the great thing about Hamlet is because it is so beloved and because it is so prolific, there's a lot of great writing on it. Harold Bloom has a great criticism, we'll call it, of Hamlet. There's a lot of other great things that have spun out of it, and that's because it is so amazing in the first place. I don't think Hamlet was crazy. I think that's a lazy reading of the text. I think he's too smart for that. I really like the back and forth between him and Laertes as like man of action and man of inaction, or man of action, man of thought. I think is very, very compelling. And then the older I get and the more my life experiences inform me, I get something new out of the play every time I engage with it. I used to think Gertrude was like really lame, and I didn't think she was very compelling. Like, I've always thought Claudius was pretty interesting, because if you have a great Claudius and a great Hamlet, the rest of the show kind of doesn't matter. If everyone else is great, that's like an added bonus, because their dynamic so carries the thrust of the drama. But like as an adult person now, I'm really interested in Gertrude and her humanity, because I think she is a really good mother. And I don't think she's evil, but I think she maybe did an evil thing. So Hamlet is one of the texts that the more I return to and the more I engage with, I keep learning something new, or it reminds me of something new. And there's always a couplet or a phrase or a monologue that just like gets stuck with me, and I'll turn over in my head for like years and years and years. I still remember my lines that I had to say as Rosencrantz, not all of them, but some of the best ones. So it's maybe of everything on this list, it might be the thing that I've engaged with the most, and maybe the one that brings me the most joy. But I have 2 that are sort of more my favorites. And again, quite lengthy. So I could spend a good amount of time with it. And if I'm alone, just knowing my personality, I'm probably at some point going to work up to a one-woman show of Hamlet for the birds and the bluebells.
I was literally just thinking you could learn all of the roles. There's actually this. So I don't know why it just reminded me of this, but the show Taskmaster with Greg Davies, one of the challenges that he did on a recent series was he made everyone learn 2 roles in a play, and they had to film it on their own, and then they meshed them together. But he made one of the contestants learn all of the words to all of the roles and perform all of them, and then mesh them together to make one play where he was just in like 6 or 7 different locations. And I don't know, there was the image, but you performed all the roles of Hamlet.
truly my dream, honestly, because as a female, unless you're in a very particular type of production, you don't get to play a lot of. I've been in Hamlet twice. And I've never played a woman in it. I was Rosencrantz the first time. I was Laertes the second time. I've always played them as a female character, but like I've never been Ophelia. Because I'm too loud and my face is too pointy, and I'm not old enough to play Gertrude yet. So, and there's other women courtiers, but those are kind of your only goes for it. So that would give me the chance to play Hamlet, who's I think the greatest character you could ever play, and then also play the two female characters. So coming to just outside of Aberfoyle, Scotland someday, Ashley Victoria Robinson as everybody in Hamlet.
I would buy a ticket to that.
Do they have a fringe festival? Maybe I should pitch it.
Possibly. We studied a lot of Shakespeare at school. So when we went through, I think we briefly touched on Romeo and Juliet, Much Ado About Nothing, Macbeth, Macbeth, and Taming of the Shrew. And it wasn't until I joined sixth form that we got to do Hamlet. And it is really excellent. I very early in my relationship with Shakespeare, I didn't get it because plays had never been something that I'd read once. And then we had a school trip quite early on in my sort of introduction to the text. And we saw a live performance of, I think it was Taming of the Shrew. And then we also saw a live performance of Macbeth at some point. And being able to see it live, it just kind of all clicked for me, because as much as I could read them, I eventually got to the point where I do enjoy reading Shakespeare on the page. It's just something completely different to see it sort of performed in front of you as well. And the Royal Shakespeare Company does a lot near where we live, and they always put such sort of, there's the last few ones, they've always put like a twist on how they're performing it. And sort of making it accessible to younger audiences as well, because a lot of the audiences that I was part of was school. And it's really interesting. Hamlet I did find really, really interesting, because we just finished doing Taming of the Shrew, and debating feminism in a class of mostly boys is really, really hard work. So I was kind of exhausted and hoping to go down a different Shakespeare path that was not focused around feminism and women's roles, because I was tired.
I'm so glad that you brought up the going to see it. And I'm also so happy that you had that opportunity, because I maintain that Shakespeare is way more accessible than people think it is, and that it is largely taught wrong, because it's mostly school children standing up, reciting, taking a pause at the end of the line as it's presented on the page, versus where the line breaks are with commas, semicolons, periods, whatever. And when it was written, the colloquial phrase was you went to hear a play. You didn't go to see a play. So it's meant to be spoken, and it's meant to be spoken well. And I also know that there's a lot of very bad productions of Shakespeare, because Shakespeare's in the public domain. Anyone can do it. You don't need permission. So like a lot of community theaters, a lot of small theaters do very bad. I was in a very bad version of Coriolanus, and that play is tough to begin with. So I feel sorry for people who have never had a great experience with Shakespeare, because I do think it is very special and very accessible. And someday when I'm very, very wealthy, what I want to do is I want to design productions of Shakespeare, and then probably other classic plays that you could take to a high school or a grammar school very minimally, but make them cool and accessible and fun, especially into like underserviced areas, because I just think it's such a gift that you can give to people. And it's something that hit me at a very important time in my life. So anyway, Hamlet is the best. Fight me on Twitter if you would like.
I wouldn't dare. I very thankfully, I mean, in my English, I was never into drama, because I didn't really like speaking in front of big groups of people. I could speak
as the lady with the podcast.
No, this is the thing. I could speak for one-on-one, even in a group of maybe up to 5, I can speak for hours and hours until someone eventually tells me to shut up. But if you make me stand up, or if I'm in a group of even a class where it's a turn to something, I went through a stage where I didn't want to talk in that particular forum, and it's something that I've managed to think about. It meant I never liked drama. I hated it when my teacher made me participate in drama. It just it was always something really difficult. But so look, we never had to read out the play, or at least I was never picked to read out. I don't remember having that experience. But I think I wish I'd had a better experience of Macbeth personally, just because I feel like I could have really enjoyed it, but the way it was taught to me kind of set me up to fail at that.
It's a fun one. So I hope someday you either get to see a cool movie or a cool stage adaptation. It's got witches in it.
Well, this is why I think there's so many good elements. And it is really, really it's an interesting play, but I think just the particular way I delivered it just kind of didn't work for me. But Hamlet is great, and I really want someone to, I mean, I like seeing them live, but I can't go to plays at the moment. It'd be really good if someone could write a really good retelling of Hamlet, just in a really interesting backdrop. I know a book just got released that was a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, but in like Shanghai, and there's gangs involved and all sorts.
Oh, that's cool.
It's called These Violent Delights, and I just heard that. I was like, yeah, that's awesome, and you should definitely market it as a Shakespeare retelling so people get interested in Shakespeare after they read it.
I also think the National Theatre Live should just release all of those filmed versions of their really fabulous productions for sale instead of only putting them in cinemas for like 2 weeks. I want that Benedict Cumberbatch, Johnny Lee Miller Frankenstein more than anything else in this world, and I would pay whatever they wanted to be able to own it. And most of the RSC stuff, like there's a really great RSC Macbeth with Judi Dench and Ian McKellen that I know in America it's on Amazon Prime, but I'm like, you have it. You know what a gift it would be to the world if you just gave it to us for money.
Yeah, I know the National Theatre during the height of lockdown, they aired a bunch of their most popular plays. Which was a really great thing for them to do. But honestly, I think they'd be doing themselves. They should just set up a streaming service.
Yes, I literally, like, when that Frankenstein came out, and that was also like the height of the Sherlock fandom as well. And I love Sherlock Holmes. I wrote them an email and was like, please put this on Blu-ray. Like, it would be such a missed opportunity. And they were like, we're not interested in exploring that right now. And I was like, okay, sorry.
Hey, they were nice enough to respond.
They did, which is more than a Broadway theater would do. So they'd be like, you don't get Spring Awakening. No. Yeah,
I recently got told about a streaming platform called Broadway HD that does have some sort of plays and musicals and that sort of thing on it. Yeah. I need to get a membership because I need to watch some stuff that's been recommended to me, but I haven't had a chance. And
but most importantly, have you seen Hamilton yet?
I went to see it in London.
Is it a trip to see that in England, where it's all about like, screw you, England?
It is wonderfully refreshing to have someone be that honest about the fact that Britain are the bad guys of history. Like, they are, like, I cannot stress it enough. And I mean, I'm from a family who have lots of very like pride and stuff, but trying to explain that, you know, Britain has been wrong quite a bit in their exploits in the world. But Hamilton, I remember I had listened to the soundtrack, start to end, hundreds of times. I knew all the words to all of the songs before I went to see it. And when I heard that they were releasing tickets, I bought 2 tickets. I had no idea who was going to come with me at that time. I just said, I'm buying 2 tickets and I'm going to go. And yeah, we went down, and I took my husband with me. He does not do musicals. He doesn't do history, and he doesn't do hip hop. But essentially, I said, you're coming to see Hamilton with me. And he said, no, I'm not. And I said, really, you're going to make me go down to London on my own? He's like, you do it all the time. And then I said, well, what if I buy you dinner? And he said, yeah, sure, why not? We ended up going to we went to the Gordon Ramsay restaurant that's like way on the other side of London from the theatre that we were going to.
I have been to that restaurant as well.
Well, it had always been a thing that he really wanted to eat at a Gordon Ramsay restaurant. I said, if that's what it takes for me to see Hamilton, then that is what we're going to do. So we went there, and then after we finished our dinner, I said, okay, we'll just jump on the tube and we'll go to the theatre. And he said, how much does the tube cost? And I told him, and he said, I'm absolutely not paying that, we'll walk.
The tube's not that expensive.
It's really not. I did explain that, if you just tap your little contactless, it's going to cost about this much. Honestly, it'll save us a lot of time. It's really not that bad. And he said, absolutely not. We've got 2, maybe 3 hours before the show. We'll sightsee on the way there. And boy, did we sightsee. If you've ever walked from St. Paul's Cathedral district in London, we walked past Buckingham Palace. I think we might have seen Westminster. We went, honestly, the amount of sightseeing we saw just walking from there, and it did take forever. And I said, I was like, I should have got the tube and made you do this on your own. But we eventually got to see the show, which was amazing. But it is, I was surprised it was so massively popular because, not because it's not amazing, but because how do I say this diplomatically? British people have a lot of national pride, and they don't necessarily like being reminded of all the times that maybe that national pride was misplaced.
Hey, Americans are the same way. So
yeah, so I was surprised, but I remember the thing that got me into Hamilton was because I got it recommended on a Spotify shuffle, and it was "You'll Be Back." So the first song of the
Jonathan Groff, he has the same birthday as me. I love him so much. King George is the best role in the show.
Well, the reason I stopped was because I got to it and I recognized the name, and I was like, that's that guy that was in Glee and Frozen. And I was like, he's in Hamilton. Strange. I listened to it. So I listened to that one song, and as you'll know, because you know the music, it's not a good sample of what the rest of the music in the music sounds like. So I went to the beginning, and I was like, oh, I don't really know how I feel about this. This isn't like anything I've ever heard before. And I gave it the full shot of listening from beginning to end, and I was like, this is genius. It's amazing. It's so good. And I just listened to it over and over again, and seeing it live was amazing. And I need to watch the original cast recording, but because I saw it live with the cast that I saw it, I want to see the original one, but I think I'm saving it. I'll probably watch it for my birthday this year or something.
It's long. It's like 3.5 hours long, so you will spend your entire afternoon just watching Hamilton.
Yeah, it's a long one. We were sat quite high up in what is one of a very, very old theatres, so there was not a lot of leg space. And my husband's 6'4", so he had to get up to walk multiple times during the show, which I heard about afterwards. But he came out of it and he loved it as well.
So you win.
Yeah. So I went. We were walking back, and he was like, "Yeah, it was really good. That's kind of annoying." This keeps happening. The same thing happened with Cabin Pressure as well.
Yes, I love the most English thing.
Yeah,
ever,
I went,
in my opinion,
on, and I said, you absolutely have to listen to Cabin Pressure. It's got Benedict Cumberbatch in it. It's amazing. And he said no, but then eventually did because he was driving a lot. And I had no idea he'd listened to it until he made a reference. I think it was an Arthur joke. And I kind of turned and I was like, you watched it? Or listened to it even, consumed it. But yeah, it was another moment of triumph for me because I don't get to be the one who recommends stuff very often. So.
Shout out to John Finnemore, I think an underrated genius who played Arthur and who wrote all of Cabin Pressure, for anybody listening. Yeah,
I had no idea that he writes so much of the TV that I watch in terms of comedy. He was a writer on quite a few of the sort of British comedies that I watch. So I was really amazed to realize how much of his stuff that I've watched. But yeah, anyway, sorry.
Anyway, books.
Yeah, sorry, tangent. We've gone down, audio dramas and plays. So Hamilton is your third choice. Excellent choice to join. And we are moving forward in history. What is your fourth book?
So my next choice is the only graphic novel that I put on my list. This is my most contemporary choice, and that is Robin Year One. It's written by Chuck Dixon, who is my favorite Robin comic book writer. Robin is my favorite superhero if you don't listen to my podcast, Geek History Lesson. And Year One is my favorite. It's my preferred Dick Grayson origin. Dick Grayson is the first Robin, so it is by default my preferred Robin origin. It is the most succinct telling of that story. I actually like Dark Victory by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale better, but I think Robin Year One is a better Robin story. Dark Victory is much more of a Batman story and how Batman welcomes Robin into his life. Robin Year One shows you Robin going on solo missions for the first time, him trying to figure out what his dynamic is going to be, how he's going to stand both in the shadow of the bat and on his own 2 feet. The art is absolutely beautiful, and they do print a nice new, if anyone is reading this and they're not playing by the rules of the show, they print it with a really nice version now. That's Batgirl Year One and Robin Year One by Scott Beatty. That's really, really incredible. But they were originally published separately. So I'm going to take Robin Year One. It's my favorite superhero. I never, ever get tired of Robin stories or Robin origin stories. Origin stories are my favorite. A New Hope is my favorite Star Wars story. Like I love an origin story. I love seeing where people come from. And I love sad little kids or sad innocent characters learning that they can overcome and that they are good enough and that their contribution will save the world. It's why Lord of the Rings is my favorite thing ever, which we're going to talk a little bit more than my top choice, but because Frodo is that archetype, even though he's like technically in his 40s when he finally goes on that quest. But so Robin Year One, it's a book that I consistently recommend to other people as well. So I would be remiss if I didn't recommend it to myself. I didn't take my own advice. It is quite short by comparison. It's probably 120 pages, I think, maybe 150 with some back matter slapped in there. But even though I'm not getting as much bang for my buck in terms of words, there's a lot of other visual aspects in terms of the art and the design and the layout. And I think once I've spent a million years reading about ancient mythological figures and ghosts and revenge, there's a lot of revenge in all my previous choices. I think that this might be a good palate cleanser as well. Just a little quick one and done. You can probably read this in under 2 hours. And I really like, if anyone is not familiar, I can't recommend Robin Year One, whether you think you like comic books or not. I think it's a very, very special book.
I had a feeling there would be an appearance.
when we first met, Jordan and I were talking about our love of DC Comics and her love of Damian Wayne, which pierces me right in my heart and soul. My least favorite Robin.
I did say in my defense, my introduction to Damian Wayne was Super Sons, which is really him in his absolute best lights.
Absolutely. It's the best version of him.
So, soft spot for Damian Wayne. But I actually, I watched Titans for the first time over the sort of Christmas break. And I've not really read or watched a lot around Dick Grayson, but I found that interesting. I know it's a bit different from what I know about Titans necessarily in that period, but it's I appreciated the story that they were telling.
I actually really like Titans. I think it figures out what it's doing by the end of the first season. And then I think it gets like really, really good. And I love that little kid who plays Jason Todd because he's like the only person who seems like he's having any fun. I don't know if I think he's the most amazing actor, but I think he is like a good time to watch. Every time he shows up, he makes me laugh. And I also love the guy who plays Hawk because he's just like a weird, dumb jock as a character. Titans brings me a lot of joy, even though it is super, super different than Teen Titans, which is my favorite superhero team. But I like an adaptation when you can find something different. It doesn't all have to be a carbon copy. And that's a whole other, talk about audiobooks, or that's a whole other debate is like adaptation. But Titans is a good one. So if people haven't checked it out, cosign, highly recommend.
Yeah, it was a good experience. I definitely appreciate Jason Todd in every scene he's in. One of the absolute. I was laughing so much I think I had to pause the show. And it wasn't anything he actually did. It was an interaction between him and Dick Grayson, because he was being himself, and Dick put him in his place. And
is it the training scene?
No, I think he's trying to basically make out like he's going to go and do what he wants, and just literally he steps up to Dick Grayson. He's like, "Don't do this," and then he does it again because he's Jason Todd, and just literally just grabs him by the side of the head.
Oh yes,
puts him on the ground.
Yes,
it's like the smoothest move ever. And I just remember watching it, and I just absolutely cracked up. I had to like pause it, take a deep breath before I could start watching, because I was like, I could watch that on repeat. That was amazing.
Someone who's listening is like horrified by that story, but it's so Jason Todd. And Jason Todd is another character who in adaptation they do so dirty. Like they don't do well by him, but like that's the most Jason Todd reaction. And the way they shoot it too, you're like, you could see the panel, you could see like Dick's arm coming down as he's like pushing his stupid head down. But anyway, Dick Grayson's not a bully. He's a really sweet, innocent boy in Robin.
He's not. He just has to teach valuable lessons to
idiots.
Kids. It is excellent. No, Rowing Year One's are really good. And also you get, like you say, you get all of the artwork, you get visual value as well. And I imagine artwork is probably something you'll have to get like prints or something to decorate your clear bubble in Scotland.
That's right. Yeah. I'll just be redrawing very poorly my favorite panels from the fight with the Hatter. I also appreciate in that story, he's not just going up against a Batman villain. He is, but they very often will pit the Robins against various Batman villains. And it's really hard to see Robin take on someone like the Joker or Two-Face or even Catwoman. But they put him against the Mad Hatter, who is like a minor Batman villain. And since he's obviously based on the character from Alice in Wonderland, I thought it was a good choice for like a child superhero. And he's a character that got more definition by being a Robin foe. So I also appreciate, just sort of from like the macrocosmic DC universe view of that, the choice to give him a foe who would let him stand on his own.
Yeah, it's an excellent one. And it was one of the only ones that I felt like I could possibly predict, because I was trying to have a think about what books might make it, and I had some ideas, but I was like, there's just so many. Because I mean, for anyone listening, if you haven't listened to Geek History Lesson, you absolutely should, because the recommended reading is just gold dust in list form. It's just everything that I've ever read that you've recommended is awesome. So I was then trying to narrow it down to 5, and I was like, she's not gonna be, she's gonna come here with like 100 books, and I'm just gonna let her take them all.
Oh man, I mean, it would be like, if I had to do this in real life, it would actually be really, really hard. As a thought experiment, it's fine, because you're like, okay, like I'm gonna make a list that's gonna make me sound like smart and interesting and dynamic and whatever. But if you like actually gun to your head, I'm like, it would be such a hard choice. And I have a lot of bookcases, and I'm not strong, so I could probably only manage about 5 books at a go anyway.
Yeah, I haven't even contemplated making my own list. I said if I make it to 50 episodes, I might do my list for that one.
You should. That's a great idea, because that's about a year.
Yeah, hopefully. So yeah, no, I try not to think about my list, but I have a feeling it's gonna be even more difficult once I've read all of the great books I'm being recommended by all of the guests.
Oh yeah, when Jordan and I were talking about the show, I was like, your TBR pile has to be out of control, and you're like, oh, it already is.
Yeah, I've already had to add like so many just from the few episodes, because they also sound amazing. I think when you speak to someone about their favorite books, they can obviously speak so lovingly, and they can make the absolute best case for reading them as well. So it's it's exciting. I've got lots of new ones to read. Robin Year One has been on my wish list for a while, but I have the Robin Year One and Batgirl Year One edition on my wish list. Which
I was gonna ask. I was like, do you own a copy? Because if not, I will send you one.
No, it's been on my list. I give everyone my book wish list at Christmas for friends and family and that sort of thing. They don't believe me when I say I want books for Christmas. They think I'm lying to trick them. But I do mean it. So I keep I keep on just sending it out there. I will eventually. I think I'll probably treat myself to it, maybe at some point in the future. I really need to read the books I own.
Yeah. No, that's the thing that I'm trying to do in quarantine time is go through everything that's in my home that I haven't read, and it's overwhelming. And I'm still reading digital books a lot.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my books on my physical TBR are actually Geek History Lesson recommendations, to the point where I was like, well, the thing is, I was like, oh, I feel like I want to do like a picture with all of my Geek History Lesson recommendations. And when I started pulling them, I was like, there are a lot here. And they're all kind of quite mixed. And I also lent a few of them to a friend because he had to isolate on his own. And he was like, can you just lend me as many books as you're willing to lend me? So I just put a box together, and a lot of them were just like, well, I mean, these are all great books. So they're all going. So yeah, some of them are traveling away from home.
Oh, that's amazing though. Like that makes my heart warm. I'm like, oh, we're doing good work besides just screaming at each other in our office all day.
I mean, to be honest, I think you'd be doing good work. Anyway, they're really interesting episodes. Cannot recommend them enough. When people ask me for podcast recommendations, it's usually top of my list. But anyway, sorry.
That's okay.
And then we've got the fifth and final book, which I think you alluded to earlier, and I was one of my guesses.
Well, so my first choice, like my number one choice, top choice, had to be some Tolkien. Like I said, Lord of the Rings is my favorite thing of all time. I don't know necessarily what it is, but like I got really into it when I was about 12 years old, which I feel like is when your brain is at its mushiest. And I'm sorry if there's any 12-year-olds listening, your brain is mushy. And the things that you absorb around that time in your life really come to define you and attach to you, because I think that's sort of when your personality solidifies. Like obviously people change and grow, and most of us calm down a little bit when we're over 20.
Most of us.
Yes, that's the key cat. I live in the United States now, so it definitely comes with a most of us. Not to get too political about it. But I reread the Lord of the Rings series regularly. I have read all the histories. I've read all the I have read like everything that is officially canon, and a lot of the criticisms of it as well. And the thing that, if this is the thought experiment, if I don't know how long I'm going to be here, I picked the thing that I keep getting different things out of and I come to appreciate more and more. So my top pick is the Silmarillion, which for all intensive purposes is the ancient history of Middle Earth. It's the history of the planet Arda, which is like the planet, the world that Middle Earth is on. There are other continents, and Middle Earth is only as big as you see on the map, right? Like it extends past that, and it tells the story of they're not called gods and goddesses, but if you're looking at it sort of as an analog for like contemporary religions or contemporary mythos, the gods and goddess figures, the Valar come over from Valinor. They're basically like mystical elves. And they all kind of like the Celtic gods, right? Like Ceridwen is the goddess of like hearth and home, and she is a chariot, and she is personified by weaving. So all of the Valar kind of have those types of traits and characteristics, and it tells about them coming over and the beginning of the race of elves, and the Astari, the wizards eventually being born. By the way, there's 5 wizards, there's not just 3, and why they choose to make them old and what their purpose is, and then the rise and fall of Morgoth, who's the first Dark Lord, which eventually leads into the rise and fall of Sauron, who we've all seen in Lord of the Rings, and the creation of men and hobbits, and how Elrond had a twin brother named Elros, and they had to pick if they were going to be an elf or a human, and how they broke off and then founded the different races. So like Elrond is technically the head of a sub-race of elves, and Arwen and Aragorn are related way, way back. It's kind of weird. It's my favorite. There is Jordan's laughing at me. There's a lot of poetry in here as well. And there's also a lay. And I mentioned that Marie de France wrote lays about King Arthur. So there is the Lay of Beren and Luthien is probably the most famous poem in here. And that tells the story of the first human and elf who fell in love. which obviously is the precursor to the Arwen and Aragorn story. And if you get a chance to go to Oxford and you like me, are too cheap to get a cab because it costs slightly more than the tube, you walk the 3 miles out of town to the cemetery there. On J.R.R. Tolkien and Edith Tolkien's graves, their headstones say Baron and Luthien. So like he wrote that poem for his wife, which I think is really, really beautiful. And I just think the Silmarillion is like the coolest thing ever. It's hard. It is like homework. And you're going to spend a lot of, if you're not into linguistics, like I speak a couple different languages. I took Latin in high school. If you're not into languages, it's hard because there's no pronunciation guide. The first chapter is called Ainu Lindalwe, and you just kind of have to know what an umlaut over an E probably means in an Anglo-Saxon context, or make it up for yourself and go from there. But I don't mind that thought experiment. I think that is really fun. And this combines, in the most contemporary sense, I think the sensibility of what I'm going for here. I want epic stories. I want small, sad people who win over evil. I want a classic hero's journey, or like a big world-changing literary trope. I want something that feels kind of like a history of a society that I feel a connection to. And then Tolkien writes my favorite style of prose, which, to make a funny joke about it, spends a lot of time talking about trees. And the older I get, the cooler I think trees are. So I am going to exclusively reread the Silmarillion, cuddled up under probably a leaf bearer tree, depending on the season, somewhere out in Scotland. And that is like a perfect scenario in my mind. So a great weekend, a great vacation for me usually involves a cabin in the woods somewhere with a little bit of rain, rereading this book. So when I started making this list and when we agreed that I was going to be on the show, I was like, the Silmarillion, #1, absolutely. And then the rule came about, you can't have a complete anything. So I was like, okay, well then Lord of the Rings is out. It's only going to be the Silmarillion. I thought for a minute, I was like, what if I just make it like the Silmarillion, Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, Return of the King? And then I was like, that's dumb. That's like too obfuscated and too intentionally weird.
Well, it would have triggered a really long and in-depth discussion about Lord of the Rings and the reason why you love all of the books. So, I mean, it could have been really good.
I'd be like, Jordan, let me just tell you about Gondor, okay? It's like really important. They got a tree. They see trees. I love trees. Aragorn's there. He's very handsome. Pippin's there. Billy Boyd is my long-held crush. So it's like, I got to tell you about Gondor. When the Lord of the Rings Amazon show sponsors your episode, I will come back and we can do the 5 Tolkien choices.
that would be awesome. That's the goal now.
Yeah, that's the goalpost.
Yeah. Essentially, so the Silmarillion, I've had a copy of that book for a really long time. I think the reason I've not read it yet is because it was when I first got into the idea of collecting books as well as just reading them. And I managed to, I got a copy of the American first edition of the Silmarillion. And I know there's tons of copies of this particular book now, and I understand that is a part of a collector's thing. But it was because it was the first one I got. It's really, really special. It's like it started my book collecting phase, and I always knew that I wanted to read The Lord of the Rings at depth at some point. And it's really, I was talked about this with much, but there's so many books out there that they're on my to read list, and I know I'm going to fall in love with them. I just haven't had the time to read them and fall in love with them yet. But I think, yeah, Lord of the Rings is something I need to tackle this year, because it's just, I've seen all of the films at the behest of my very best friend who adores Lord of the Rings, and I can't avoid it anymore. I can't put it off anymore. I absolutely have to read it.
Please send me a message when you do.
I definitely will. I've read The Hobbit, and I loved The Hobbit when I read it. And I want to progress with the series. It's so strange. Last year, I was going through sort of a planning phase where I started just planning trips with no exact date to them, because I didn't know when we would be able to take them. And a trip that I planned for me and my best friend and Ruby Loden, previous guest of the podcast, because they're the people who love, they both love Lord of the Rings. They basically said they wanted to go to New Zealand and see all of the Lord of the Rings places. So I planned a basically week-long itinerary for traveling in New Zealand, seeing all of these places where Lord of the Rings was filmed, starting in Auckland and Hobbiton, and then working your way down to various mountains and locations, which you are more than welcome to join us on when it eventually happens. But it's really amazing. I was just doing a lot of research about filming locations and that sort of thing, and how it leads into it, and you can follow sort of the path through New Zealand and almost kind of follow along with the story of the book. So
if you're going to do that, I highly recommend looking up. There's a gentleman called Mike the Guide. He is a travel guide, and he actually was an extra, a featured background performer in several scenes across the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And he's based out of Wellington, which is where Weta is based. And he'll do the Lord of the Rings tour. He's a really lovely guy. And when I was in Wellington for work, and he reached out to me and was like, I'd love to show you around, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, the only thing I want to do is I want to go to the rock quarry where they shot Minas Tirith. Like, I don't need anything else. Because like I said, Gondor. And he was like, it's a working quarry by the highway. Like, you cannot go there. And I'm like, all I want to do is go by the rock quarry where they shot Minas Tirith. And so he drove me all the way out there with the Gondor music playing. And we drove past and I cried. But yeah, if anyone, that's another thing I want to do. I want to do that for like 2 weeks, like go to like the northmost point, make your way down, see the little hill where Edoras is, and all that. But New Zealand is like unfathomably gorgeous, and they make really good coffee. So highly recommend. Also, if you're into sheep, New Zealand's great for that too. Lots of sheep.
Yeah, I was kind of spoiled for choice when I was looking at all the things to do, and even outside of Lord of the Rings, I basically could have filled 2 weeks with just Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
But like outside of that, there was just so many amazing things. They've got a clock that it's a glockenspiel clock that reenacts Romeo and Juliet 4 times a day, and it was just It just sounds like a really amazing place, somewhere I really want to go eventually when I'm allowed to go places.
Yeah. Yes. I was going to say, no, I won't say it. And New Zealand's amazing, and they're lovely, and they made fun of my funny accent. So highly recommend visiting.
I lost my sentence. Sorry.
It'll come back if it's important.
Oh yeah, I hadn't really understood how meaningful and how sort of emotional it could be to see somewhere where someone thinks something was filmed. So for me, it's not something that I'd ever done or ever really wanted to do. It had just never been something that appealed to me. And then when we went to Scotland last year and we went to some of the places that Harry Potter was filmed specifically, which Harry Potter, like a lot of people, big part of my childhood. Something that I watched a lot when I was younger, even though I haven't watched it as much recently. And when I got to sort of specific places where you sort of walk through, and it's like you can see the actual scene behind where Hagrid's foot is filmed and that sort of thing. I just remember just being completely like taken aback by how it would feel and that sort of thing. So it's something that I kind of want to explore with different with all these other things that I love as well, because I was just like, oh, this is just amazing. I need a photo of me in front of this.
The other side of that is like I live in Los Angeles, and so a lot of things have shot here, and like I'm completely like not taken away by anything that's ever shot in LA, because I'm like, oh, that's Griffith Park, I know where that is. But to go to another, like to make that pilgrimage, I think is quite something.
Oh, it's quite funny. Video games have been used in a lot more sort of locations, because my cousin was playing a video game and I saw it in the background of like a video call, and it was he was driving around London, and I was like, that's actually London. I've been down that road. I was like, they did a really good job. I was like, that's really impressive. They replicated that really well.
The first time I ever went to London, I remember our tour guide being like, there's MI5, there's MI6, if anyone's into James Bond. And everyone's like, oh wow, these office buildings, how cool.
Yeah, office buildings.
I mean, they're lovely office buildings, but they're office buildings.
Absolutely. I mean, because I design offices as part of my job and that sort of thing, and I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to offices, just with the way they're designed, because I'm like, that's really interesting. Oh, they did that. But equally, I don't think I could do a tour of specific authors. Excellent. So those are your 5 books. Do you want to summarize the full list?
Yes. So going from first to last choice, I had the Iliad by Homer, the Lay of Marie de France, Hamlet by William Shakespeare, Robin Year One by Chuck Dixon, and the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien.
Excellent. And did you have any honorable mentions that nearly made your very sophisticated, very impressive list?
Yeah, my very smart people list. I almost put another Robin story called Robin to Kill a Bird. It is by Bill Willingham. It's from the later Robin series. Robin got his first series in the 90s all the way up to the mid 2000s. I don't consider the later half to be the best part of his series, but that was the first Robin standalone graphic novel that I ever bought. So it really means a lot to me personally. I just think Robin Year One is a better story. And I don't mean that to sound shady, but I just thought, especially because like these are also low key recommendations. So as a one and done, it's a much better, more sophisticated look at the character. To read To Kill a Bird, you have to know like a lot about what was going on in DC history at the time, and and like that's a big ask, especially if someone's never read a Robin story before. I considered putting Return of the King on here because that's my actual favorite, like Lord of the Rings world story as well. So unfortunately that didn't make my list. And then I also put I almost put Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides on my list because I think Jeffrey Eugenides and Cormac McCarthy are 2 of the best contemporary American authors who are writing. Cormac McCarthy can be a little too mean for my taste. I think The Road is probably his best thing in terms of my like what I like. But I really, really like Middlesex. I think it has a lot to say. And I think it's a very sophisticated take on gender and identity from a cis man, which I know we're not all necessarily looking for, but like as a fiction, it's very, very good. I thought about putting one of RuPaul's earliest books on here because I think that his memoirs from like the 90s and the early 2000s, like right before he broke really big, are very cool because they're a lot about like crazy stories about working in New York and believing in yourself. And if you have enough grit and determination, like if you see yourself as a star, you will be. And as someone who's a creator and an actor, that really hits home with me. And then I just recently got into Octavia Butler, who is like the preeminent Black science fiction writer. And it is eerie if you read her work, because she's no longer with us, how prophetic it feels to this time. And I know she's very popular in a lot of spiritual circles, and a lot of people who are like looking for enlightenment and answers really turn to her. And it is like wild to read these stories, which are published as fiction. And I'm like, it feels like you predicted the pandemic and the arguable downfall of an empire. But if you are not into like the woo-woo side of it, they're really, really great science fiction as well. And I feel like I didn't do enough justice to female writers with my list. It being that I only have one on my list, and she is ancient and super, super dead. There's also a version of my list where it's all just like contemporary YA, because I'm reading Mirage right now, or I'm about to start Mirage, which is a sci-fi series that was recommended to me. But like, there's so much good, or like I could just have a list that's all like Sarah Rees Brennan books.
Could just do a genre-based list. So every genre.
Absolutely. I mean, you're gonna be in like your 6 or 7, like when your podcast is as old as my podcast. That's what you're gonna be like. Okay, like can you just do your graphic novels, or who do I know who can do horror? Like I haven't read a ton of horror because I'm a giant baby. So like I couldn't do like what are the best Clive Barker stories because they're too scary.
Well, in several years' time, who knows? Maybe I'll go, oh, all those people that I left on those deserted locations, they could probably do 5 more books. I'll get in touch and see if they want 5 more books.
It can be like, are you sick of Hamlet yet? How many times have you remounted it?
Yeah, it's the thing. Return of the King, I think is I've heard there's a lot from a lot of people that's a favorite, and I think it's interesting because usually most people's favorite in a series is like the first one, so I always find it really interesting when it's not the first one. I mean all Great. You can have them all. Do you want them all?
Yes, please.
No, I was really sorry. It was a really, really great list.
Thank you.
And yeah, I have more books to read. I'm gonna have to go and add them to my to my wish list.
Well, the great thing about my list is the first 3 are free because they're all public domain. So every digital bookstore, if you go digital, you can find like free versions of all of these. So
yeah, I actually have several. I think I have copies of most of them as well. So I really have no excuse not to read them because I do actually already own them. But yeah, that is an awesome list, and thank you so much for being on podcast with me. If anybody listening wanted to hear more about what books you like to read or other things, where could they maybe find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Ashley V. Robinson. The V is very important. Ashley Robinson is a WNBA player. I don't want to fight for SEO because she's bigger and stronger than me. I'm sure she's lovely. I want to meet her someday. But so Ashley V. Robinson, that's me. Please tweet me your recommendations because like Jordan, I'm always looking for more things to read. Tweet me cute pictures of Robin. If the sound of my voice didn't make you want to crawl out of your seat, then you can listen to the Geek History Lesson podcast where all fine podcasts are had. We have over 350 episodes. So if you're looking for free entertainment, I got you, girl. Don't even worry about it. And then if you would like to see me put my money where my mouth is, you can also pick up a bunch of comic books that I have written. They've been nominated. They're award-losing books. I have a series with Jason Inman, who is my husband, and my podcast co-host called Jupiter Jet. There's 2 volumes in that. Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio is the second volume. It just came out a couple months ago. Our other original graphic novel, Science, The Elements of Dark Energy, is available. And then if you're listening to this before the middle of February 2021, you can go to superbestfriendcomic.com. That is Jason's standalone Superman homage. Ooh, I punched my microphone. Superman inspired story. I'm very enthused by it. If you're reading this later than that, I'm sure you can find out where all fine comics are had. The plan is for that to be a series. It's really good. I was the first beta reader, and I wasn't an editor on it, but that's a great one too. So if you liked anything I said and would like to see if I can stand up to this, you might be disappointed, but I definitely try in all of those books. If you want a signed copy of them, you go to jasoninman.com/store and I'll sign it. Send it anywhere in the world to you. Thank you.
And I highly recommend literally everything that Ashley just said. I have.
Oh, and follow me on Goodreads. I just got on Goodreads. I need more friends.
Yes, all of that. I have read all of the books published to date, and they're all excellent for all readers of all ages. So if you have any birthdays or Christmases coming up and you don't know what to buy for kids, you should buy them books.
Yes, co-sign Eve. They don't have to be my books, but just give people books.
Yeah, you should buy people books for presents. People need to read more. Awesome. So go follow Ashley on all of the social media. Follow Geek History Lesson. Go to superbestfriend.com because I've also back that. I'm really excited. That is also on my TBR.
Yeah, you were like the 6th person.
Yeah. Oh, I had a glitch in my internet. I was insanely cross that I didn't get through. I was ready. But yeah. And if you wanted to follow the podcast on social media, you can follow it at Books to Last Pod on Twitter. We have Facebook and Instagram. We are on Apple Podcasts and a bunch of other podcast providers that are also come under Apple Podcasts. We're on Stitcher and a few others. I'm still waiting for Spotify, but it's coming.
They take a minute.
Yeah, I think you need a minimum of 5 episodes. So if you're listening to this when you're trying to catch up on the 5 episodes, you can also find this on Spotify.
Hey.
So thank you again, Ashley, so much for being with me and joining us on the podcast. It was so much fun, and I can't believe this actually happened. I'm so excited. Yeah.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing the time zone math, because I definitely only sent my time zone recommendations. So I really appreciate that because it's hard.
It was a whole mind thing. I was like, so we're going to be on the same day, but she's going to be further back in the day than I'm going to. It was really strange. But yes, thank you, Ashley, for being on the podcast. Thank you, listeners, for listening. And Until next time, bye.